This is Gene Krebs.
Hi there. Oh. Whoosh.
And we're high on Ohio.
We're going around this great state, we're interviewing folks who know how things work, and we're very pleased to be joined today by Larry Long, recently retired from the County Commissioners Association of Ohio, where he's been executive director there for how long?
Well, 25, 26 years, but I've been there 39 years.
Yes, yes.
Unbelievable.
Yeah, and one of the 5 people in Ohio who actually know how local governments work, and by that I mean work themselves and work in relationship to each other, the state and the feds. You got to look at it in the totality, and there's you and just a very small number of folks in your same caliber. So one of the things that is surprising about county government is the emphasis on human services.
Oh, it certainly is, yeah.
But nobody seems to know that. I know you've always talked to me a lot about that. What's your personal interest in this, and why are counties so much involved in human services?
Well, you know, again, counties are the primary delivery agent for for human services, and whether that's the commissioners or alcohol, drug, mental health boards or children's service boards or job and family service departments or child support enforcement agencies, those are the primary services that are delivered at the local level. In Ohio, unlike other states, we have what's called a state-supervised, county-administered system of human services. In other states, some of the things that you see being done in Ohio by county employees are really being done by state employees in other areas. And so you mentioned, and again, there's an awful lot of federal money involved, particularly in what we used to call the old welfare programs, our human service programs. So that comes to roost. You got the state, federal, and local, and the county government involved. So counties are really the delivery agent. The state and the feds in many ways set the framework and the parameters
But they're
for
just pass-through.
eligibility and delivery of services, but we do it at the local level with our staff.
They're just pass-through entities then.
We do, well, not always.
I mean, not the state and the feds.
Your basic, what I call income maintenance programs, your TANF program,
Right.
temporary assistance for needy families,
Right.
your social services block grant program,
Right.
food stamps, Medicaid, most of that is state and federal money. But let's not forget that how generous the citizens of this state has been, because so many of our services that the county delivers and uses some state and federal money, it also comes from local property taxpayers in terms of voted property tax levies for children's services, for mental health, for alcohol, drug, for child welfare services, children's services programs. All those are voted on, and then if you put that together with school programs,
Yeah.
in terms of, and again, Ohio's not a totally unique state anymore, but since the Depression years, we've had to vote for levies, if not before that. In some other states, the county board just sets the levy rate. The residents have no opportunity. So when you talk about being high on Ohio, I think, Gene, a great example of that is we lose some levies, but the residents of this state, by and large, have been very, very generous in both education and in the delivery of human services. Does that mean there's adequate resources to meet all these needs? No, there's not. But we've been very fortunate that the residents, and some of that is a result of the service delivery, and there's been successes in this stuff. So people, the local residents have voted taxes on themselves to provide these human services.
Let's talk, right now the hot topic around the State House is Medicaid expansion.
Medicaid expansion, right.
And I bring up the statistics to my friends on the right, and I tell them that 63% of the current state budget is right now just federal pass-through.
I didn't know it was that high, but
it's 39 billion out of 62 billion.
Doesn't totally surprise me, yeah.
Yeah. So, why do you think is prompting this response by some folks? Is it against the Medicaid expansion, or is it Medicaid itself?
I think what we're dealing with is a broad philosophical difference, and I think I think if you go back, we're going through that change in terms of what's the role of government, and I think there's an awful lot of fear that we're moving towards socialism. You're getting more and more government involvement in healthcare, in those types of programs, and it shouldn't be done that way.
Okay.
So I think it's sort of that ideological, the philosophical. I mean, even the governor. The governor opposes Obamacare,
Right,
but he's been out front on the expansion of Medicaid,
Medicaid.
and was finally successful
yeah.
through the controlling board on that. But I think it's sort of ideological, and it's a fear of how much is government going to be involved in our daily lives. I think you got a sort of a demarcation at this point between the Republicans and the Democrats on that type of issue.
Yeah, the money, in other words, is not really the key issue, it's a philosophy.
I think it's primary. It's as much philosophical, and I think the legitimate point though that I think is made here from my perspective is what if the feds eventually back out?
Yeah,
What if they back out? We're gonna get quote free money. It's all
Right.
our money. It's all
Right.
taxpayer money.
Right.
So, but what happens if they really start reducing the reimbursement? We're supposed to get 90% money.
Right.
In the long term, we only get about 2/3 in that range right now, back from the feds for the regular Medicaid program. So what happens if they pull out? And I think we've seen at the local level a lot of times, not only at the federal level, but at the state level.
Are you
We
talking-
don't- they get us out on the limb and they saw it off.
are you talking perhaps about the, is a public defender program?
Well, I think that the poster child of quote unfunded mandates at the county level is the public defender program. Back in 1976, we entered into this handshake. We shook hands with the state and we developed a program because of a U.S. Supreme Court decision that says you have to provide counsel for indigent defendants.
Yeah.
We shook hands and said, we'll pay half and you'll pay half. Well, that lasted about 4 years.
Until the next budget crisis hit.
Right. And again, you can't plan any more than 2 years, and any commitment people make in the General Assembly, it used to be you could get a little longer term commitment.
Yeah,
In the last 10 or 15 years, no.
because the term
You
limits.
and term limits have had a lot to do with that. So you get a 2-year commitment, and that's it. You don't get long-term commitments. People do things at certain times during that 2-year budget period in good faith.
Yeah.
I'd never say they didn't
Bad
mean to
faith.
do that.
Right.
But things change in 2 years, and in the end, we're at the bottom of the food chain. Counties are generally at the bottom of the food chain. Counties deliver all those services at the local level, and if the state doesn't provide the money,
Yeah.
guess who gets stuck with it? It's the county in most cases.
I'm joined today by Larry Long, who is the recently retired director of the County Commissioners Association of Ohio. I'm a former board member of
You
yours.
certainly are.
And I got to see how this organization works up close and personal. And we have this segment here we call myth busting. We get to talk about something that people don't know is true. Everybody thinks one thing. It's kind of a way to puncture a massive groupthink out there. So, what do you have?
Well, the one thing that immediately comes to mind deals with my former bosses, the county commissioners, and you were one of them.
Yes.
You were there 4 years.
Yes.
And now I've had almost 40, so I
Yeah.
can hardly believe that. And you can relate to this, people on the street, the general citizen, I think, believes that county commissioners have a heck of a lot more power and authority than they do. Anytime anybody has a complaint about virtually anything in the county, they'll come to county commissioners, and a lot of times the commissioners will say, I can't help you. You got to go talk to the engineer.
Yeah.
Or you got to talk to the judge, or the clerk of courts, or the children's service board. And those people then guess what? They think they're getting the Washington runaround.
All right, but now, so in order to give your county commissioners more power, not absolute power, not like the judge executive in Kentucky,
Yeah.
okay, which is a county commissioner, basically.
Yeah, it's a bit like a county mayor almost.
But they're like a county king, to a certain degree.
They have a lot of power.
They have a lot of power. There's been a lot of chatter in Ohio, and right now, as we're filming this, we still do not know. There's several counties that are looking at a charter form of county government.
Right.
What are your thoughts on going to a charter form?
Well, I think particularly in large counties, I think it works very well.
Okay.
I
But
think
why not in small?
Well, I think business can be done a little better, and I think it's a little closer to the people. You don't have the problems and all the interrelationships I think that you got in the big counties. But I think particularly there's a lot of people in the large counties, they wouldn't know all 3 county commissioners.
If they came up and
If they were on the street. You go out and ask, here in Franklin County, go ask who the 3 commissioners are. I bet you people may be able to name one of them.
They'll start naming
Everybody
Steve
knows-
Stivers. They'll
everybody
mention
knows-
Steve Stivers.
And everybody knows who, but everybody will know Mike Coleman.
Right.
You ask who the mayor of Columbus is. So
Right.
it's sort of that type of thing. So I think the real question is, can we manage more efficiently? Not the
Yeah.
power. You got independently elected officials that have an awful lot of authority and responsibility, and it can become relatively inefficient in
Okay.
some ways. So generally, I'm sort of an advocate for these governments. A good example, let me give you an example, and actually there's legislation in right now to try to deal with this issue. Does every county need a county coroner?
Yeah.
Why can't we do 2 or 3 counties in a regional medical examiner system? So I think you need to look at it locally in some ways. I think it's more acceptable in the larger counties. I think there's more reluctance in small counties, but I think
Yeah.
there's ways why couldn't we combine the county treasurer and the county auditor into one elected position instead of 2? Why couldn't we combine the county recorder and the clerk of courts into one elected office? You know, I think those things can happen, particularly as we move forward in technology.
Yeah, I go back to it, and you're very right about I will say that for smaller counties, it may also be a richer target environment. I'll give you a case in point. The county treasurer has usually, in a county, my county, 40,000 people and 60,000 hogs. You know, never could get the hogs to vote for me. They couldn't get them up to age 18 for one thing. But for counties that small, the treasurer with only 2 employees, if they're not filling out the tax, not getting ready to send out tax duplicates, and I suggested at one point in time that they share an employee with the auditor.
Oh, yeah.
Oh,
Yeah, I can imagine the reaction.
The wails that went on, and they said, well, who can do the evaluations and all this other stuff? And all I got was a lot of bureaucratic gobbledygook and doublespeak, and it could move it forward so that they could begin to have a person they could share during non-busy and during busy and non-busy times, because there's it's like on the farm, you don't want to have a tractor for every job. You want to have a tractor that can do multiple things.
Yeah.
And they were all hell bent on having one tractor for every.
And the example I always give, just look with the clerk of courts, who has the important responsibility of doing auto titles.
Right.
Those have to be done well.
And
the
done right.
county recorder.
Right.
Who records the deed to my house. That has to be done well, or it's a real mess, and there's significant financial issues involved. But what I believe is you can cross-train people to record an auto title and a deed. That can be done, and it's easier now that we have computers and programs that populate fields, and it almost becomes a mechanical process. And so we can do that, and then we're sure that we're getting the most productivity out of all the employees.
Yeah, and I think that's what Bobby and Betty Buckeye are wanting.
Well, I think they do.
Yeah.
And I think there's a natural limit. Again, we've talked about how generous the citizens have been in voting for property tax levies, or in some cases, sales tax levies. There's an end to that, and we have an obligation to prove to those taxpayers that we're doing the best we can with their money.
What keeps you up at night? And if you say it's a barking dog, we want to know how to fix the barking dog.
Sleep apnea keeps me up.
Okay, all right.
For one thing, but I guess the one thing that really concerns me is both at the national and the state level. And just look at what happened here recently in Congress with nearly coming to default, government shutdown, and again, we've seen some of it. It's the philosophical bent that we have. The Democrats and Republicans don't seem to get together and work things out for the good of the people. And so you're seeing much more ideological types of positions, much more partisan, and I think there's less camaraderie than used to exist. I know particularly in the Ohio General Assembly.
Yeah.
The old days of going to the Neal House or the Galleria and having a drink and people getting to know each other and knowing the names of the kids. I don't think as much of that goes on. So I think the big concern I have is it seems to me we have these philosophical and ideological debates, and we really need to narrow that gap and try to deal with issues as to what can we do given legitimate philosophical differences.
Now I'm going to ask you a very dangerous question because I have no idea how you're going to respond. And I know you pretty well. And that is, this morning I was talking to a nice young Republican legislator who he and I were talking about this. and very issue. And he said, what we need to think about is of the top 2 past the post nonpartisan primary. So that, like some other states have, you have the top 2 vote-getting candidates. It could be of one party, both party, one of each party, could, whoever. And he says he thinks that would help force the candidates to stop being quite so overly ideological, either from the left or the right. Because I'll go back to one of our good mutual friends, Sean Logan. Mm-hmm. Long been an admirer of Sean. I once asked Sean, you ever think about running statewide? And he just laughed and he says, I'm a pro-life, pro-gun Democrat. How long would I last in a statewide primary? So how do you think something like this?
I think something like that should be discussed. I think, is California doing that?
California's doing
that.
I think Louisiana has
I don't know
it.
how it is out there, but I do know that the way the districts are drawn right now, it just on both sides.
Yeah.
I think those on the right are way out there, and I think way out on the progressive left.
Yeah.
I think they've all gone too far, and frankly, I'm tired of hearing about the 1% and the middle class and all those debates that go on and on, because I don't think they have much relevance to day-to-day activities and making government work for the citizens of this state.
Yeah, you mentioned in an earlier interview, you mentioned that your late mother was a Dixie Democrat.
She's a Dixie Democrat, and Dad was a Republican business guy. Yeah.
Yeah, and so out of that mix, but you have that. The Dixie Democrat is a vanishingly small segment of the population. We used to you could call them Copperhead Democrats,
right?
Reagan Democrats, Jeffersonian Democrats, Jacksonian Democrats. And it just keeps shrinking and going smaller. And the primary, the thing I'll say though, you're very interested, I know, in Sprawl, because we served on the Farmland Preservation Task Force of 1997. Right. And I'll tell you, in 1976, 1/4 of all the counties in America were landslide counties, where Carter or Ford won by 20 points or more. In both 2004 and the 2012 elections, okay, half of America's counties were landslide counties. Mm-hmm. Sprawl.
Right.
And part of me is afraid that sprawl has made Ohio and indeed America hard to draw up, where you would end up with good cross sections of humanity, because everybody now self-segregates.
Yeah. It's difficult, and in those small areas, again, the job opportunities in some of those small areas, we're losing our best and brightest.
Yeah.
In a lot of ways, to the urban areas.
Yeah.
Or to other regions of the state, and that's a real shame. And I think if we could really address that, we need to do something as a state, in my view, to try to retain our best and brightest through scholarship assistance on other things, so then they have a commitment for a 2 or 3 year period. If you get the kids out of college and they start in Ohio and get established a little bit, I think they're liable to stay. If you lose them right out of college, it's unlikely you're going to get them back. Yeah,
but I'll tell you, back in Preble, but you've been there many times, you know it quite well. My problem is that once my kids go to Ohio State and see the short north, they're not coming back.
I understand.
They're not coming back to Camden, New Paris, West Alec, or Eaton.
Well, and I guess I actually remember those days when after I graduated from Ohio State and ended up in Port Clinton. Yeah. As the county planning director, I came back to go to school again. But one of the things, there wasn't a lot to do in Port Clinton even in those days for me.
Yeah.
Now I think I'd be pretty happy up there.
Now we're going to ask Larry that topic. That's just sort of a more recent introduction here. So, have you read any good books lately?
Oh my gosh. Well, actually, a couple. Yeah, and I'm in the middle of one right now.
Okay.
The one I finished just a couple weeks ago is, and don't ask me the author, I can never remember the name of the authors of these books, but it's a book called Destiny of the Republic.
Okay.
Which is a story of James Garfield.
Okay.
Who was shot by Charles Guiteau in an assassination attempt, and it tells that entire story, including the fact that they had Thomas Edison at the White House, with a machine trying to locate the bullet. And of course, in those days, it was before the doctors actually killed Garfield.
Yeah.
It was before the days that antiseptics.
Yes.
And antiseptic methods in medical world, everybody just poo-pooed that. They didn't think there was any And so it's really, now I gotta get up into our friend Dan Troy's area and visit the home in the Presidential Library, which I think is at Mount, in one of the colleges up there.
Okay.
So that's a great book. The other one is a book that was actually was fun to read. It actually was written by a former employee of ours at the association, Doug Putnam. I don't know if you remember Doug or not.
Yeah, I remember Doug quite well.
So Doug wrote a book. I think it's a second novel. And
Is it available on Amazon?
It is on Amazon, and it's
Okay.
called Young Republican.
Okay.
And it's an interesting story. It's a story about a young adopted child who from Marietta,
Okay.
who runs a race, gets involved in politics with a commissioner's race in Washington County.
Okay.
And to make a long story short, he then becomes a aide to Governor Jim Rhodes, President Ronald Reagan.
Okay.
Ends up squealing on someone when he becomes an independent lobbyist.
Okay.
And in terms of some shady deals as an independent lobbyist after he left the White House, and then he gets religion. So
Okay.
so that's it. The book I'm reading right now too is an interesting one. It's called Last Call:
Okay.
The Rise and Fall of Prohibition.
Oh, I saw that review.
And of course, it's got great Ohio roots because the Temperance Union really had roots in Westerville, and the Anti-Saloon League had roots in Oberlin.
And it was basically it's an anti-immigration measure. Yeah, people don't understand it. That was all about the new immigrants weren't like the ones that were already here.
That's absolutely right.
And the Italians all had wine, and they were as a way to keep out the Italians. They thought it would make America a dry country. The Italians will either go home or they'll stop coming.
Yeah. Well, the other thing I've learned so far from the book, I'm about halfway through it, is that this was also going on worldwide.
Really?
As I understand it, and it was going on particularly in Canada, where they had a different type they could sell, and there was a lot of liquor and alcohol coming over the borders into North Dakota from Saskatchewan and Winnipeg. But it was also going on that way. I think it brings relevance. It's interesting. We're in the debate about marijuana right now, and you sit and you read the book. And at least it's made me raise the question, wonder where we'll be with the marijuana issue 20 years from now or more.
10.
Again, we enacted the 18th Amendment, and then and a few years later enacted the 19th Amendment to do away with it. And
how long was that gap? What was it, 7, 8 years?
I don't remember. I think that's about right.
It's pretty short.
Yeah. So that's a great book. Pick it up, and it's on the Kindle. I'm reading this one on the Kindle. The other two I got hard copies.
And the title of it again is
Last Fall: The Rise and Fall of Prohibition.
Okay.
And it's available on Amazon too.
Okay.
And The Destiny of the Republic is available on a CD.
Okay.
So it's on those long trips back and forth between Preble County.
Yeah.
Put that in your CD player.
Trust me, Preble County anywhere. Preble County anywhere is a long trip.
And there's a wonderful person that reads the book.
Oh, that's very important to have.
And so it's a great book.
And by the way, in case the listener is wondering, Dan Troy, County Commissioner in Lake County, former chair of the House
Ways and Means
Committee, is one of those other 5 people.
Is he? Yeah, he's one of them.
Yeah.
Well, Dan's one of the more knowledgeable people. I just wrote a little article, and you won't remember, but the one before that was a gentleman from Fayette County by the name of Larry Bucky Dumford. And I just wrote that Dan probably is next in line in terms of overall knowledge of how all this stuff works. And that's a guy that Bucky Dunford taught me.
Okay. Wow, very interesting. This is Gene Krebs, and on behalf of the Center for Community Solutions, we're high on Ohio, and we hope that you've enjoyed these series. I really do want to thank former Executive Director of the County Commissioners Association of Ohio, Larry Long, for joining me for this week's episodes.
Thank you. It's been fun.
Oh, it's just conversations. And we'll see you next week with who I have no idea. But we'll see you then. Take care.
For more about the Center for Community Solutions or their publications, please visit www.communitysolutions.com.